Okay, last but not least, but definitely probably one of the more fun ones, is the RGB Parade. It's a funny name, but it's a fun. This is useful information, especially when we're talking about the individual colors happening in the shot, and this becomes really relevant when we start monkeying around with the matrix. Color is made up of three primaries, right? Red, green, blue, and this parade, as you can probably tell, is showing us the amount of each of these colors in the shot. Now, if you have your white balance totally messed up, these will not look relatively identical. But the goal, in short, and for you beginners, the goal here is to get these to match relatively close with some exceptions. I think this RGB Parade looks pretty good. It's pretty close to everything is kind of within the same range. We don't have anything that's flatlined on the bottom. We don't have anything that's flatlined on the top. No extremes, okay? The bottom is representing your blacks, and the top is representing your whites, and then between. So blacks, shadows, mids, and then highlights, and then whites, pure whites, okay? And it's breaking that information down into red, greens, and blues. And so if we were to go over to Cam Control and start monkeying about with our white balance, we could probably see this in the extremes. Now, we could also play around with the green, blue. Now, I'm going to write down these values because I always change them, and then I pay the price for them later. 160. Okay. Okay, so here we go. Inside the camera, so I'm just going to cut over here. Just give me a quick second here. So inside of the and you can still kind of see right here in that little corner the blues. So here I'm going to manipulate the camera reds and camera blues, but you can break these down into three more categories, which is the red, green, blue categories, and we can kind of individually manipulate them. And I want to show you what that kind of does on the actual waveform, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull down the blues and head towards green. So I'm going to go from value 169, and I'm going to go to value 150. Okay, so 169 to 150. Okay, this is 169, and this is 150. That is not easy for you to tell what's going on here. So 169 looks like this. Okay, notice that the blues bumped up in the mid-range a fair bit. And then if we go down to 150, the blues are dropping. Now, if I were to look at this RGB Parade, I would say the blues are underrepresented in this shot. That things are a little too red, a little too green, or a little under, the blue is a little low. And so if I want to change that, I head towards the blue on the white balance settings. I head towards the blue, and I know, because I wrote this down, that I need to be in the 170 range. So I'm going to go over there to 170. And now my blues are at about the same level as my greens and my reds. Now, blue is obviously a colder color, and red is a warmer color. Okay, let's think of it this way. If I want my camera shot, to match the color intensity, okay, the color intensity of my lights, which I stated earlier is like 5,500, 5,800 Kelvin, I'm going to want my color to be fairly cool, over warm, all right? So in this instance, my blues are pretty much spot on, except they're slightly higher than my reds. Okay, so if you look at that scale and you see the blues, John, the blues look to be like they're a little bit higher than the reds, you are correct. And that's because my lighting is actually cooler than typically. Typically, people like to set it up in the 3,000 Kelvin range and then balance kind of everything together along the same plateau. But in this instance, my lighting is actually purposefully set cooler, and so I need to make sure that my cameras are either balanced across the board so I get that cooler look, or they're compensating for that. So if I want to change my blue values, I can do that in the blue gain. Now, the other thing I want you to notice is When I change the blue value down, okay, I'm headed towards green on the web UI, notice what happens to notice what happens to red and green. Okay, they also move. The blue value itself does not only move, but the reds and the greens also change. Now, there are cameras on the market that will allow you to independently manipulate that to where you're only changing one value and the other ones are locked. But in this instance, with just the white balance options, and we're moving those two, camera red gain and camera blue gain, when you're moving those two, that's going to manipulate the whole graph. So reds are going to go up as blues go down, and it's going to do this number. And greens will also change respectively, especially because I'm headed towards green. So the green's going to go up as the blues come down. Now let's manipulate the red gain just a little bit to show this as well. So I'm going to head towards the yellow side of things. Okay. Notice that blue and green went up and red significantly dropped. And so if I were to look at this shot and I was to use the RGB Parade, and in particular, if I didn't want to trust the computer screen I was using, I would know without a shadow of a doubt the reds are underexposed on this shot. Okay, the reds are underrepresented on this shot. And then I need to head towards red to compensate. So let's go on up to red, and we're going to take this way too high. Okay, this is a great example of, obviously you've never used this, and if you do, I mean, if this is your art, then like an Andy Warhol art, good for you. But if this is what you're going for, fantastic. But obviously the reds are off the scale here. There's just, data's lost. It's basically useless. So we're going to start dialing it back. Now, again, if I had a black and white screen or a monitor that I didn't trust or an old broken monitor or something like that, I could still balance this using the waveforms, okay? Or using this RGB Parade. So I can make sure that the colors are within accuracy, and we can start dialing it down. Now, is that what it's supposed to be? Yeah, that's what it's supposed to really be. So now my reds and my greens and my blues are pretty much in the same range, all right? We can change the gain and the hue. So in the matrix, all right. So now I'm going to move over. I'm going to enable the matrix. I'm going to move towards the matrix side of things, and we're going to watch what happens on the RGB Parade when we start manipulating the actual red gain, the green, and the blue gain. So here we go. So we're going to go red green. This is red green change right now. And if I pull that, oh wait, I should probably, okay, so this is currently set at 0 on this, okay? So I'm going to pull that down and go to -40 towards red on red-green. So if I change that, it doesn't do a whole lot. It's a minor change, okay? I actually don't mind that too much. But it really pulls the color out. This is like a neon green, okay? So it really pulls the color out of the green that's in this. Let's keep going. So -70, okay? My skin tones are starting to lose their color. The redness of my blood that's going through my body is basically being removed. And then all the way out at -99. So we don't see a huge change on the waveforms when we're changing red-green. And now we're going to go the other way. I'm going to go halfway up the green. Okay, so now a lot more red has been introduced. And now I'm going to head all the way up to 99, which is extreme, and now there's way too much. Now, you can also see, if I move my hands around, you can see that data is now in that really high area, that highlight area, where it's being overexposed, and we're starting to lose some data in the shot. So it's way too red, and it certainly doesn't match the other green and the blue exposures and such in the shot. So we're going to go back to 0, and everything's kind of back where it's supposed to be, okay? All right, we can continue going here, and we can manipulate. Let's do something like blue-red. So if this is set to 29 right now. So if I change this to 99, now I look like I'm jaundiced. It didn't change too much other than the fact that there is a whole lot more red in this shot. And we can see this because of all the data that's above on the red scale, right? There's way more there than there is on the blue. And you can see that same data is below the mid-range on the blue. Okay, so the reds are way turned up and the blues are too low. And so that information is being exposed in two different ways, over on the red and under on the blue. So we can dial that back. That's closer to my skin tones. Now, same thing's going on here, but I actually have it set this way to like, it's set to like 22. If I just go dead to 0, yoink. There. Now that information is closer to the lines. It's almost like dead in the middle. But I look like I'm very washed out in this shot, which is why I turn up the blue reds a little bit to 20, 22, somewhere in there. And then that gives me like my proper skin tone, and I feel like I don't look like I'm a ghost. So we can use our RGB Parade to tell us how the balance of the color is. And once you understand the dynamics of this and you're getting them to look relatively close together, we can use this information regardless of what our computer screen is showing us to get the colors pretty close to what we want them to be. The beautiful thing with the P4K is there's a lot of manipulation with color that you can do because the sensor is so big. It's a 1-inch sensor, whereas the P200 doesn't have quite as much to do with that, but it's helpful. Now, the one other thing here is, remember that we're going from, at the bottom, our blacks and our shadows up to our highlights and our whites, okay, on that scale. Well, one of the things that we can use here is, because we have control on a P4K of our gamma levels, we can manipulate the black levels in the camera, which means that we can turn them way down and really crush the blacks, or turn them way up. So let's go ahead and play around with that. Now, I have clicked on my P4K cam control, and I'm on the gamma tab. And I'm going to manipulate. The first thing I'm going to manipulate is just the black level, okay, black gamma level. So I'm currently at -1. So if I start dialing this back, now I'm at -4. You notice I start losing all this data. And did you see what happened to the Parade? Is that on the Parade, all that data went down into the blacks levels. So bam, it starts getting squished. We start losing that data, and the image looks obviously over black. We keep going. That data starts getting lost altogether. There's no information. There's no detail. There's no data. It just looks like this shirt has no dimension at all. It's just outputting black. So if we manipulate the black gamma level, we can crush all the color in the image and force it into the blacks and basically lose all of that information. But we don't really want to do that. Okay, I want to provide some dimension. I want you guys to see that I'm wearing an actual shirt that like has fabric, you know, that I live in this world. So I don't want to crush the colors. Matter of fact, I may want to, if you're trying to balance this out, you may want to go the other way. And because on the RGB Parade, you have a lot of data that's there in the shadows. Okay. And so maybe we want to go the other way. So let's try that out. If we go up to like +3 on this, notice that the black levels come up, and that things are not sitting right at the very bottom of that actual Parade. And so we can come up a little bit more even. And that brings that information, okay, the wrinkles in my shirt and the dandruff and all that, brings it all into the spotlight so that you guys can see the actual dynamics. Now, I actually don't hate this. And I like the fact that I can see more detail in this shot. So if we go to the extreme, that's 7. That basically means nothing is pure black. I only have basically the high end of the shadows and then midtones in this shot. I actually like that a lot, but it might change with the color that we're going to introduce. So let me go back to my standard. I might consider changing this now that I've played with that a little bit, but this is what the shot originally was. Now, let's manipulate just the black level slider, which is the second last option on the bottom. Now, I'm at -10 right now. So if I go down 1/4 of the way, which is -25, it's going to lower, it's going to actually bring down that black level and start crushing some of that data. So now you can see right at the very bottom of the RGB Parade, there's like a white line on the left side of that little parade on each, the red, the green, and the blue. That means that is dead on black. Okay, there's no data. It's just lost completely. And it's likely this portion right here, because there is no light here. It's likely getting lost there. And we can manipulate some of that and find out what it is. It might also be this screen, to be honest with you, because there are pure black things in this shot when I have the black level set to that much. Now let's just play devil's advocate here and go at extreme. Okay, so this is -48. Now I have very little data in this shot. And so it's crushing all of that information. You really don't want it to be on extremes, okay? Unless that's what your subjective art form is. This is the vibe of your show. But you're losing a lot of data that you could, especially if you're going to do it in post, do something in post, it could really help you out if you had that data and you could color correct it later. But if you're saving this as the raw file, there's not a whole lot you can do with this if this is the information that you're capturing. So let's now go, I'm going to set this to -1. All right. Now you can see, this is just right down the middle. Now you can see all that information kind of stretched out in the shadows and the low mid-range, okay, of this shot. It doesn't necessarily get into the highlights at all. That's the gray wall, by the way. This line that goes across the RGB Parade, that's the gray wall. But it doesn't, a lot of this is shadows and then low mid-range because it's a black shirt, obviously. So let's start dialing up here. So we're going to go up to +25. Okay. Now there are no blacks in this shot. There are only, there's only going to be shadows and very few shadows for that matter. Most of it is midtones. All right. And obviously that will continue as you raise up the extremes. And so now there are no shadows in this shot. Now it's just midtones and higher. So whatever it is that you're trying to go for here, whatever your look is, the Parade will tell you how to balance that and also break it down into your 3 primaries. So I am going to go back to -10, which is what I normally have it set at, which is not at the extreme. I'm not pushing things right to the very bottom. But now I've played around with this a little bit, and I kind of want to use the black gamma level at about 5. Okay, so now I don't have anything in the extreme realm. Now I have space at the bottom, space at the top. I'm not losing any real color data here to either extreme. All right, so the last thing that we're going to do here is introduce color again. So let's go back to my ever-changing colors. Now check out what happens. And this is why having a neutral background really helps on the RGB Parade, is because this information is not useful to me because it's constantly changing. And check it out. We go blue, blue goes way up and reds go way down. Well, how am I supposed to balance this out if I am having this issue? Now, I think I just realized what happened here. ND filter off. Where is the detail? Here it is. Anyways, the point here is that when you're doing something dynamic like this, you're not going to be able to balance things effectively, especially if you're using a set that has changing colors and what have you. RGB Parade is going to be moving around on you all the time. And so it's super helpful to just put a hold on that. And then when it comes time to add color, you know, okay, my subject was lit correctly without the color introduced. And so then we can add color, manipulate intensity, put them in different locations, and that will help us out, create some dynamic element into the shot. So RGB Parade is super helpful and very, very effective in showing you where to set your gamma levels, for example, or where to, if you have somebody with a bright shirt on that has a lot of pink in it, or that's washing, if they're wearing a red Alabama shirt and it's washing out their skin tone because their blood is also red and they're, they look like they're a giant red Skittle. You want to dial that back, and waveforms can help you do that regardless of what screen competency you have. Okay, so if you have an LG or a Dell, or you have a Samsung, or you have one of each, and they're all doing different things, they're all scaled to different colors and whatever, you don't need to spend hundreds of dollars buying a color balancer collaboration tool. Stop. Turn on your scopes. Go to your RGB Parade, or go to your histogram, or go to your waveforms and start balancing things there across your fleet. And then you'll know my shots are pretty consistent. So it's a beautiful added feature that BirdDog has given you free of charge with the NDI5 update. The cameras that are out now have this option, and I'm sure it's planned for in the future, but it's a free thing that we want to be sure that you know that you have access to, and that it is a really useful tool when you're trying to balance color and exposure and white balance. In all of those 3 elements, which are things that people especially people new to the industry, it can be intimidating. I promise you, I understand that it can be intimidating. Hey, watch these little video shorts on how to balance your color, and I promise you, you will start honing in on what it is you want to produce and what it is you think looks good. And you'll start learning about the capabilities and flexibilities of your BirdDog cameras and the NDI protocol in general. So I really hope you guys have found that helpful. I am going to end the segment here, but I hope that you have found that overview of scopes somewhat helpful. Happy to take some questions, and we will giddy up from there.